Hi guys, welcome to episode 9 of Tiger Heart Chats. We have had an amazing response from them from the last podcast, which was focused on animation. I've got a really cool guest who I've shared the virtual stage with over the last few weeks at the VR and AR conference. Please welcome to the stage the wonderful Darragh Dandurand.
Thank you so much. I'm so flattered. What a lovely introduction.
How are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing very, very well. As you and I were discussing, I'm back in New York City. I actually just arrived back to New York June 14th. What day is it? The 16th? Wow. Yeah, I've basically been here for almost 2 days. And it feels like a different world. Yeah.
It was listed in my questions to ask you about the Black Lives Matter movement and how it's affecting you. I mean, you're based in the States. How is Black Lives Matter affecting you right now?
I'm glad that you just asked that question right out of the gate, because it's so important. And definitely here in the United States, I think globally, I know globally what's going on in the US here is having tremendous impact with people talking about racial divides and inequity and a whole medley of other issues that intersect into it. And I have to say that when it comes to BLM, Black Lives Matter, and similar organizations of different name, I'm really proud of them. I think it's really important to differentiate between protests and riots. I think that civil discourse and gathering and engagement and demand for better policy is the right thing to do. And this is coming from someone who's been highly involved in both grassroots and more regimented and bureaucratic politics and organizations.
Absolutely.
For years. Yeah.
There's some people that are listening to this podcast who don't know much about you. Give us a brief background of who you are and where you're from and what you do.
Sure. Thank you for asking. I just mentioned that I have background in politics. And by that, I mean, in particular, I've served on several boards of different nonprofits, often always affiliated with women's rights. But in recent years, I just actually stepped off the board of NYC Pride, which is the organization that hosts Pride here in New York City, a little less than a year ago after a 2-year term, and World Pride last year. I've done a lot of work around sexual assault, and I've done some lobbying that was related to human trafficking regulation and laws. And with all of those very, very uplifting, exciting, albeit very important, the work that I do on a day-to-day basis outside of my political interests, I am a journalist. I'm an independent journalist. I formerly covered music for many years, and then I covered arts and culture and some breaking news and social impact. Today, I really cover technology, immersive technology in particular. And I also work as a creative director, that I sort of hop between different ad agencies, startups, creative studios, where I really try to advocate for immersive technology. And I'm sure if people are listening to this show, they're aware of what immersive is, but in case they're not, just giving your work, Sanj, but in case they're not, it's virtual reality and augmented reality, and a number of other technologies that are absolutely incredible for storytelling. They're really, really just mind-blowing. And I know that's a lot of hats, but I proudly wear all of them.
That's awesome. Just with regards to the agencies that you work for, so who have you worked for, like as a immersive technology consultant?
Sure. I've worked for a number of different groups, as I was saying. I'll jump between, say, a startup that's really trying to figure out how to tell the right story and how do you navigate press. That's such a huge responsibility. And you have to really know how to do it right. Yeah. And so being a journalist, I can also flip to the other side and do press management and talk to journalists. I just finished up a project with a publishing company called Andromeda Entertainment based in Austin. They do mindful and wellness gaming. And wow. I did a global launch on the Oculus Quest headset of a game called Audio Trip. And that was a really fun thing. It was a great experience, wonderful team. Prior to that, I was doing a contract with Buck Co. Buck Creative is based, they have offices all around the world, but I was working out of their New York office, and I was doing a contract for an immersive experience where I was a script lead, and I can't talk about it.
No, that's fine.
Very fun. The team over at Buck is great. I hope to work with them in the future. And I love that just everyone just has like this very cool all black wardrobe, and it makes me feel right at home. I have no color in my closet. And I'm like, wow, oh my God, everyone here is just, y'all look like badasses, and they are. Prior to that, I was doing a fun project earlier this year. Oh, it's so crazy to think, the pandemic just changed everything. I feel like I was working just back to back to back, and then I'm still working on stuff, but of course everybody's world is so altered now, and it's like time is different, how you structure work. To finish the thought, I did a wonderful, really fun project with the new museum in Manhattan and a really cool creative studio called Sensorium, and we brought an augmented reality piece and a VR piece to the new museum, and it was just a wonderful exhibition, and it was related to environmentalism and the relationship between technology and environmentalism. And
That's so cool. What was the name of the agency again that you worked with? Sorry.
That was a creative studio called Sensorium, and we partnered with the new museum. Mm-hmm. And then I'm trying to remember, just like the last few projects I was on, I did a contract with Refinery 29 and Vice on their experiential and immersive team. And that was working as a creative strategist with different brands and clients, and trying to figure out what was the best way to approach the demographic, the standard creative director kind of work. And I had a ball. The team at Refinery is absolutely lovely. I worked with some incredible creative directors, namely Stephanie Riggs, who's a really cool woman. She's written books on immersive technology. And so she's kindred spirit. And that's sort of like backing up right to the end of last year. But that's, some of the projects I've worked on, and they're all pretty much connected to immersive tech and bringing people together. And I think that's why it's such a powerful type of technology. It just sort of demands that people come together to discuss, to bond over a shared experience. And it's so impactful.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I set up Tiger Heart, was just I had a kind of hunger to work with emerging technology because it's so new, and the opportunity to explore it is exciting because it allows you to kind of engage with this technology in a new way and experience new experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it feels, for many people, at least that I've discussed, whether I'm putting them in a headset for the first time, which is an honor I shall never get sick of. It always feels so special to introduce someone to VR or AR, or to have them just go through an immersive experience where they feel like they get transported. And that fills, I think, this hunger that many people have, that's insatiable for new forms of, I say this word cautiously, new forms of novelty and new ways in which they can engage with one another and sort of engage with the world around them. And we have so much opportunity now. And it's amazing to be in this industry of emerging technology at this point, because virtual reality in particular, there was a French scientist, I'm sure you know the story, a French scientist who came up with the concept of virtual reality in the 1930s as we know it. And then people have been studying it all through the 20th century, but mostly on a theoretical level, trying to figure out how the hell to pull it off. And we're finally at the point where we have the technology, which is surreal.
Yeah.
So cool. We can actually do stuff.
How did you get into this then? So, I mean, it sounds like you're doing lots of really cool things. It's a very buoyant space from the sounds of it. You're working with lots of different agencies. You're being dynamic. You're learning. You're also engaging. How did you fall into this industry?
Sure. And I think the word fall into it, or the term phrase is definitely appropriate, because I believe only the first graduating class of students to study VR programs or concepts of VR graduated in like the last 2 years. It's so brand new that you kind of do fall into it.
Yeah.
Unless you somehow were grandfathered in through someone that knew of it years prior. For me, well, actually, to go off of that thought quickly, I think it's what makes the industry really exciting right now, because working in immersive technology, it's a very small industry. People are becoming more aware of it, but it's really cool because there are people from all these other disciplines. And I come from a background, as I mentioned, I'm a journalist. I've also worked in fashion for many years. I didn't mention that earlier, but I still work in fashion, which a lot of the commentary I make in immersive technology is on hardware and use case and style and the economics of that and adoption for the tech as well. So there's that piece, but also, it's that you have people from all these different backgrounds that are coming together, and they're providing this very diverse tapestry of experiences to pull from in an industry that is pretty tiny. And I don't know, it just makes it more inclusive to me. I absolutely love working in immersive. And for a long time, I actually resisted pursuing tech, even though I had an interest, because I thought that I would not be welcomed as a voice.
Right.
And in this niche, I feel very welcome. And I'm glad that I corrected that assumption I made. How did I wind up in immersive tech? Well, I thought I wanted to pursue a career in nonprofits, and I was working at the national headquarters of a well-known nonprofit here in New York City for several years. And it was an honor to be there. I was very proud of the work I was doing, but I was getting really sick of bureaucracy. It was a really big organization. And I just, I cared about the mission, but when you work at a nonprofit, it's like you never can do enough, right? You're solving the problems. You have to constantly get at it. And I had previously worked in film, media for several years, and I was like, oh man, I miss the rush of excitement, the creativity, how everyone's sort of jumping in, getting their hands dirty, making something happen. And at a nonprofit, I think smaller nonprofits, you can have a similar experience, but at a big one that's almost run like a corporation, there's very clear lines of, I do this, you do that, you don't really cross over those boundaries. And I just wasn't having the experience that I wanted, especially in a city as creative as New York. And I met someone working in technology right around the same time when I was thinking about leaving the nonprofit I was with. And we became friends. He actually introduced me to VR. And a few months after we'd met, and after some really, eye-opening conversations about technology and empathy-driven VR, and he actually showed me experience that made me cry for the first time. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This, to be in VR, to have that emotional impact for the first time was humbling. So I was kind of, totally on board with this new tech I was being exposed to. And he wanted to start a company and wound up getting funded by an accelerator called Boost VC out in San Francisco. And he called me up about a month, maybe not even a month, into getting funding and said, hey, I know that you're looking to transition and you're looking to go back into media and entertainment, and you might be able to find the same creativity and, type of work, but in a new industry. Would you want to help me build this thing? Because he'd been a creative technologist, but he didn't know how to run a studio or productions or anything. And I had experience doing that. And 2 weeks later, I was in San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah. And I left the nonprofit, and it was sort of a gamble whether or not it would work. And it was a very exciting 10-month ride and introduction into VR as a contract. And then I moved back to New York City, and I've been consulting and doing creative direction, as I mentioned, and now covering technology. And it's so cool. I just love it. I'm so happy I made the transition, the career switch.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I came from the music space, which which was awesome. But I always felt that at the time when I was in the industry, that it was really struggling in the digital and innovation space because A, they didn't really understand it, but B, they didn't really have the resources and infrastructure to invest in new ideas. And it wasn't until I sidestepped into technology with my music experience that I started to kind of shine within the music space, because by that moment it was like, wow, we need people that understand how to apply this technology to our business model. It sounds like this person that approached you, who's based in San Francisco, valued you and really appreciated your skill set and knew that, you know, you coming to San Francisco with him would have benefited him. So that's a wonderful, wonderful story. How long ago was that?
So that feels like so much longer, because I feel like I jumped head first in and I just took it all in. But that was actually February of 2018.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're based back in New York now, and you're part of the team that set up VR Scout.
So for VR Scout, they're based in LA.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was not part of the founding team. I'm not sure how long they've been around. I'm going to take a wild guess here, and I don't have the correct date on it. I'm going to say they've been around for like 5-6 years at this point.
Okay. What is VR Scout?
Sure. So VR Scout is half a production and events company. And they have all this great information online where, you know, they'll either bring on a client. I've actually never worked on this side, so I'm doing my best to describe it, having not worked on projects with them of this type that I'm explaining. So they have a production company. They'll take clients. They'll produce immersive content. They also produce really cool events, and they have a partnership with YouTube where they'll, you know, have creators. They do like a 360 or VR filmmaking camp for high-profile YouTube creators to get people more introduced to immersive storytelling, 360 cameras, and they're just a force. On top of that, they also have an editorial arm, which is the one that I contribute to, among other publications. But I really like working with them because I feel like VR Scout, and given its numbers of readership, I'm forgetting the exact number, but I was recently in touch with my editor there, Kyle Melnick, who's a really sweet, thoughtful man, and a really good writer, and very committed to his team of journalists, and just a great guy. But I was in touch with him recently. We were talking about readership, and it was really impressive because VR Scout is an industry publication, but the way in which we as reporters do our reporting is that we keep in mind people who might not realize what we're talking about. We're not just writing about like pancake lenses, okay? We're not going so heady. There are publications who do it and do it really well. What VR Scout does is take into consideration the novice to immersive, and it's one of the first online magazines that pops up when you type in anything VR. And so we're like a first line of defense as an introduction to the industry. And I think that's so cool because I've had people reach out to me on some of my articles and be like, I don't know what you're saying because I've never tried this stuff before, but it sounds cool. Can you point me in the right direction? You know, I've never read something, or I never have come in contact with information about VR that made it feel like it was relatable to me. And so VR Scout, I think, brands themselves on the editorial end as being accessible. And that's exactly what this industry needs right now.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the business publications that do well are the ones that are approachable from a reader's perspective. Yeah. Do you get many consumers contacting you through VR Scout? The reason why I ask, I was on a podcast last week with a lady in Australia. She runs a podcast. The reason why she approached me was because I work in this space. She's not a tech person at all, but her and her family use VR every day. She's a mother of 3 kids, and they use VR in the evenings every day, and it's taken over their life in a positive way. Because, you know, usually when you think about VR or any type of technology that takes over, people start talking about addictive personalities and et cetera, et cetera. But the way she was talking about it was how it's liberated her from being almost middle-aged mother based in Australia with 3 kids. And she didn't say this, but it kind of felt like she didn't really have much of a life. But through VR, she's managed to find other people and communicate with them and have fun and develop new friendships, etc. And it was the first time I've ever spoken to consumer about VR in that way. And, I was asking her questions like, well, have you had any negative experiences through it? She's like, yeah, I have. But the great thing about VR is you can just block them,
Yeah.
as opposed to, when you meet someone in real life, you can't block them yet,
Hang on it.
Yeah. I've been working in the tech space for a long time. And it's usually between B2B. We do a few events where consumers get involved, but we never really get much feedback from the consumer. I mean, you see things on social media, but a social media post is only 10% of the amount of people that are on a social media network. So to talk to someone that raves about VR because she's a consumer and it's helped change their life, as opposed to someone that's trying to sell VR, was really refreshing. And I just wanted to know your thoughts about that.
Thanks for explaining that to me. And her story sounds really interesting. And I know a few, I'll say, cases like that where people have sought out VR, not as a creator, but not even as a gamer, not someone who's necessarily quote unquote in the know. And they found it to be liberating or affirming. One woman comes to my mind that I recently was in correspondence with for a work project, and I wanted to get a quote from her about how VR had impacted her life. And she's as far as I know, she's, I think, a middle-aged trans woman. I know she's trans. I'm not sure of her age. And it allows her to just be herself after what she alluded to as many years sort of navigating in the real world. How do I present myself? How do I, talk about myself? And she is a gamer. But to see her happily embracing her avatar, there's so many identity politics around avatars that I find fascinating. And that was really beautiful, and it was really eye-opening, and it wasn't shocking because I think it makes a lot of sense. You can be another person and connect with other people on your terms, to the point of the woman who interviewed you, being able to block people, being able to connect with others so far off. And I think I'm laughing and I paused because I just got hit with a memory that's very relevant. I did a panel earlier this year. It was about fashion and technology, and through a wonderful organization called Out in Tech. And we partnered with a tech company called Dynamic Yield, and just shout outs to them. And one of the questions came up. I sort of represented the emerging futurist technology on this panel.
Yep.
And there were all these different really cool people that also worked in tech or in fashion with me. And then they had an overlap in the tech. And I was sort of being asked these humorous, but a little bit leading questions about should we fear technology? What's coming, Darragh? What are the AI is going to take over, that kind of stuff. And very much related, I think people can fear new things. We've seen that all the time. People can sort of, try to navigate it with a myriad of responses, but there's often fear when it comes to new technology because we don't know how it's going to control us. And I think having some type of conservation is good, when it comes to your data, etc. But the thing is, the story I brought up about this trans woman and the woman you brought up from Australia, human consciousness and the human desire to connect will always win out whenever we build something. We ultimately want to connect with one another, and we ultimately want to be seen. Every single one of us wants the validation of feeling like a human being. And whether you're doing that in a virtual space or a real space, you just want to be acknowledged for who you believe you are.
Yeah.
And VR is so powerful for that reason. And I bring up AI because it's also controversial, much more controversial, but it's not going to take over the world. If anything, we can design it in the right way so that it doesn't have bias, and we can correct it so it's the best version of ourselves. And I think that's how we should design technology, is consider the best version of a human self, a human identity, and try to build it with that morality in mind, those values. And so I love that story about the woman in Australia. I think that that's really special.
I mean, I get asked that same question all the time, and they're usually leading questions into this kind of dystopian vision that everyone's been kind of conditioned to because of, you know, fantastic sci-fi films or books or whatever that are out there. You know, whether it's Black Mirror or The Terminator, everyone assumes technology is going to destroy humanity. I think I'm on the same page as you. I don't believe these technologies will kill us. They're just going to change our future and change the way we evolve. Particularly, you know, you talk about artificial intelligence and automation, and how there will be a moment where those technologies will take away from the burden of the way we kind of move as human beings, whatever that is. And there's a lot of people that are saying, well, it's going to take away jobs. But what does that mean if it diffuses the labor intensive aspect of what we used to do? I feel the way people's minds are kind of wired, and I mean this generally, into how technology is going to affect us is very negative, which is a shame, you know.
Yeah, I hear you on that. You're reminding me of a conversation I had with a lovely friend of mine named Fred, who's a really cool dude. He runs the French production company out of Paris called Atlas 5.
Okay.
And he's just a lovely, thoughtful man. And I was talking to him about exactly this. And we were in particular, this is like a year ago or something, because he's now moved back to France. We were having a conversation one day just walking around in Brooklyn, and we were talking about the future of essentially socioeconomics in relation to and like the concurrent development of emerging technology and automation in particular. And Fred runs a production company, and a company that does Atlas 5 is really cool. You should check them out if you're unfamiliar. They do beautiful pieces. Actually, they co-produced one of my favorite, if not my favorite, VR title called Battle Scar, which is about like punk rockers in 1980s New York City. And it's 6 minutes long and it's incredible. So basically where Fred sits in this conversation and why it's relevant is that his company hires all these technologists to, you know, either come up with brand new ideas or to churn out the code and the graphics and everything to create these pieces, right? They're a production company. They're almost an agency, but they're doing their own work. And his opinion was fascinating. It's like, okay, so do you think that means that you'll hire, you know, less people essentially? We're talking about like future generations of children in particular, you know, what will their world look like for automation? And he was so confident and didn't miss a beat when he said, it's creatives that will need, you know, yeah, robotics jobs or robots will just take over, you know, factory jobs, blah, blah, blah. But if you're a creative and you can execute and you make yourself relevant, no robot can ever take that away from you. That's how you have to see it. And I love that answer that he gave, because this guy is in the wonderful position to bring on artists and all these other people. And he's a businessman by trade. He's not an artist himself, at least as far as I know. But he deeply sees the importance of artists in this world. And when there is this dystopic future, and I don't know about you, but I kind of have fun with some of those answers when I get asked on panels. I'm like, should we start talking about bionic implants now? Where are we? You know, how dystopic are we going? We're already seeing elements of it. And the thing with technology is that, you know, in human beings, we easily assimilate. And that sort of goes back to earlier in the conversation when you asked about Black Lives Matter. And, you know, there's certain standards that we're used to, and people are now uprising because they don't like those standards. Mm-hmm. And they have every right to do that. And I endorse that. Same thing with technology. Like sooner or later, you'll get used to your data just getting sucked dry, right? We're kind of already there. But if you can be conscious of the technology you're using and the technology that's coming, like if you're listening to this and you're not a technologist, but you're interested, like stay informed, understand what's coming down the pipeline, because there are articles, people are talking about this on a regular basis. Be conscious of what you'll be expected to know and use in the future. And if you're creative, get in on that conversation so you can define what the future looks like.
Amazing words.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the Fem Futures Grant.
Sure. So there is a immersive funding platform, and I would say also pseudo distribution platform called Kaleidoscope. And it's run by Renee and Selena Pinnell. I believe I'm pronouncing their last name correctly. Renee and I have been in touch we've probably known each other as industry colleagues for the better part of a year and a half. He wanted to create this. I think he's a former indie filmmaker. He's based out in Austin, and he wanted to create a platform to help immersive creators find funding and have the right conversations. Because the thing about being in a brand new industry, as I'm sure you've found too, is that it's super exciting because there's no standards, and you get to define those as a community as you go along, and you get to debate them, and you get to figure out what's right and what's wrong. But the thing is also that you have ambitious, well-intentioned people coming in, and they don't know how to advocate for themselves because there are no standards. Yeah. And so Renee, to my knowledge, identified that, having worked in film, which is so saturated. And just from my own experience, it's very hard to have the right funding conversations in the film industry. And he saw a need for that in narrative immersive. So by that, I mean, telling stories through VR and AR. It's often associated with the film or the games industry, and that's just one aspect of immersive tech. But he really identified with that part. That's the part I've worked in a lot too. So he created this platform called Kaleidoscope, where a creator can upload a project that they want funding on at whatever stage of production, and then you also have to register for this platform. That's important to note. And then they can essentially seek out other community members who either have potential funding access and power, like curators or, people that work at production companies, etc. Or they can reach out to colleagues who are also indie creators and get their advice. And then they can also get advice on how to pitch and how to discuss, seeking funding and what someone who is a funder expects to see. So the Fem Futures Grant is Kaleidoscope's response to what's going on in the world, and that people are losing work right now with Corona, and that there's a need for important content, particularly content coming from minority voices. And so Fem Futures Grant is one of a few that Kaleidoscope launched. I believe there's, I'm forgetting the rest of them. There's the Activist Lens Grant. I think there's like Premium Showcase. There's a Creators Grant. There's a Black Creators Grant. They're launching a bunch of them. And these are essentially quote unquote crowd-funded grants, meaning, this is important to say, if you're interested in one of these grants, you can go onto Kaleidoscope. And I know all this information because I am on the board of directors for the Fem Futures Grant in particular, among many other wonderful women in the industry who I admire, and I'm really enjoying that we can, promote this grant opportunity and, discuss and give feedback to the creators who are applying. But if you want to apply, you do have to sign up for a membership, and there's membership tiers. A portion of your membership you can then designate to one of these grants, right? So like everyone else can also do this. And then you decide how large the grant is that month. These grants are happening monthly moving forward. And then for now, although Renee, I was in a meeting the other day, I don't think it's bad to say this, Renee is assessing how voting will go in the future. But for now, it's based off of you campaigning on the platform. So anyone who is a member, not just the board of directors, can vote for you. And there's talk of how to navigate that in the future, but that's how it looks now. So it is a really cool thing. And if you want a free membership to try for a month, to sign up and try it for free, I can do that. So hit me up so I can help you in case you can't afford a membership due or not, and you just want to test out if you like the platform.
That sounds like a really cool platform. So it's kind of like a little bit like crowdfunding or Kickstarter, but a bit more kind of specific to ideas. as opposed to a thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the projects that are being submitted are pre-production to post-production.
Wow.
And they just
Amazing.
have to specify. Yeah, it's really incredible. And then you'll just like last month, I can say for Family Futures, a project called The Choice One for funding. And I believe they received the grants again range every month. So I think that they got $1,000 or $1,500, and it's about abortion, and I proudly voted for that project, and it was, I think, really important. I believe they're in post-production. I actually have a call with their director later today to check in. I'll be mentoring them on distribution and marketing. So I'm excited for that. But it's on abortion, and it's telling the true stories of people who've experienced abortion and who've had to make that incredibly painful choice for their health and just for their own life as they advocate for themselves. And I admire that because Kaleidoscope also has, a whole myriad of other topics on there, from narratives, documentaries, whatever it is. And I recommend you check it out because there are some brilliant people who are trying to make great things happen on there.
Awesome. I'll definitely check that out. And we'll put your contact details in the liner notes of this podcast. Let's talk about women in tech. I feel there's not enough women in technology, women voices in the tech space. What are your thoughts about women voices in the tech space? And do you think there's a problem? If there is, how can we change it? If there's not, just what are your thoughts about that?
Sure. I would love to see more women in technology. Earlier, I mentioned that there were elements about the tech industry, I don't want to say scared away or intimidated. Those aren't the right words. But for many years, I was like, you know what? Let's say fatigue. I'd worked in the music industry, super male dominated. I've worked in film, very male dominated. I've worked in fashion, incredibly male dominated. People are surprised by that one for some reason. And going into tech, there was a feeling of fatigue. So not fear, not intimidation, but fatigue. I'm like, oh man, do I want to deal with sexism? Do I want to deal with bullshit? Is pursuing this new industry that I'm not sure I'll even like. And I mean, tech's huge, and working in immersive is like a tiny niche portion of it. And I also said, in my eyes, very inclusive right now because it is brand new and people are just running for it from all these different directions. And I feel like if you're in immersive, it's kind of a risky industry right now, because it's still sorting itself out and there's not a tremendous amount of funding in it in comparison to the rest of tech. So you have people that are really kind of risking it all to get involved. And that's a very specific type of person, and someone who's deeply tied to their convictions and values and wants to build something worthwhile. And I like those people. So I feel super welcomed in immersive technology. In technology overall, I've dealt with sexism and it's bullshit. Other women, I'll say bond over this, but it's not like a rite of passage. It should never be that. And sometimes it's that way. But it's more like, a friendly voice in the void. It's like, hey man, I hear you, or hey other woman, I hear you. And it's not a fun time and we'll get through it together. The benefit of not a ton of women, the only one I can possibly see, and I don't think it's ever going to go away regardless, is that there's not that many women, especially like when I worked out in Silicon Valley for a year, that if you sort of like raise your hand at a conference and you're like, hi, any other women out there? The chain of connections and command, you can so easily talk to executives and people that have been in the industry for a long time, because it's a woman connecting with another woman, and we want to see each other successful. And when I first joined the industry, I was so welcomed by all these incredible women, new to immersive tech, had been in it for a long time and were seasoned, were business professionals, were, kind of experimental creators. And all of them, in my eyes, valued each other equally and valued me equally. And I'm deeply grateful for that feeling of sisterhood. I'd love to see more women involved. I wish the stigma / very real reputation of sexism in the technology industry would begin to dissolve because we see better practices moving forward.
Mm.
And the reason, for example, why I'm on the Femme Futures grant is because Renee reached out to me and was like, I know this is a priority for you. I know that, advocating for women is something important. I want to do this grant. I'd like for you to be involved. And it feels fantastic that people associate me with that, because women and women's rights is a major passion of mine for obvious reason. But I'm very proud of the work I've done to help other women. And yeah, I appreciate that you're conscious of your ratios at your conference that you host, because there are just too many incredible people and we need to consider their voices.
I don't know, maybe the question was quite leading. And, I don't know the New York tech scene as
Sure.
well as I know the London tech scene. I've been out to New York loads of times for work and done lots of things.
Yeah.
But in London particularly, there is a problem. I do feel that, things are changing and things are getting better, but it's the worst feeling in the world when we're invited to an event, we go to it and it just feels like you're being shouted at by 5 men. And that's not to say I hate men, but it's just, do you know what I mean? I feel like there is a problem and it just needs to be addressed. And I guess I just wanted to just hear your thoughts about that and just see what you thought about it. It sounds like the space you're in, the circle you're in, is very positive.
Yeah.
There's lots of good things happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of respect being initiated, which is so important.
Yeah.
And it's great. And that's really refreshing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that is very true. And I think I've both simultaneously sort of wound up, quote unquote, but then also, there we go, stumbling over my word, very selectively curated the people I'm around. So some people are like happy accidents that I met them, and I could not be more overjoyed. It's just life, right? That's how relationships go. But other people, I saw what they were doing, or I saw how they lived their life or did their work, and I was like, wow, you were just a superb human being, and I'd love to get to know you. So I do have a wonderful community, and I feel flattered that you recognize that and said it. I have wonderful friends, and I've met incredible colleagues and peers within Immersive. I'm incredibly grateful. But in connection to what you're saying on a wider scale, I mean, you're talking about men shouting at each other, selling their products at a conference, and I don't know what the London immersive tech scene is. So,
I mean, it's awesome. No, the London immersive tech space is awesome. When we deliver creative futures, it's really important for us to kind of be conscious of that.
Yeah.
Not in a patronizing way, but just to just to give people that space.
You're making me think of 2 very quick stories that are related to this. You already said this, and I just brought it back up. I think every city and every scene is very different when it comes to immersive, and most of the major cities in the world have their immersive community at this point, which is so cool, whether it's very casual and it's enthusiasts and evangelists for the products and for the experiences, or they're actually developing and creating in their studios. And, they're all going to look pretty different. I think people in their mind associate technology with men, but that's just such an outdated concept, especially because, women were, a lot of the first programmers, because people thought it was an incredibly boring job, almost associated with like sewing, like, oh, it's just so tedious. Like women can do the math and whatever, and we'll just leave them to do it. So it's so funny how we change our views of things over time, and yet we forget the past. So that's a piece of it. The 2 quick stories. This one is an experience that I had only a couple weeks into working in technology. I was at a major tech industry conference out in Seattle, and I was there on behalf of a studio I was working with. And a colleague of mine was giving a talk, and I was so happy to go and support his talk. And I've been practicing it with him for a while. I've done public speaking for years. And so he, sought out my help on that. We'd be practicing in his hotel room and coaching him through it and getting the language right. And I just was so excited to see him up on stage. And this man comes up to me and just says, hi. And I say, hello, right? We're at a conference. And he's like, oh, why are you at this talk of all the talks? And I was like, oh, I'm so excited to support so-and-so, my colleague that was speaking. And he's like, I was, it's a business conference. I was in a business suit dress thing. And he's like, well, you look beautiful dressing up for your boyfriend. You must be so proud.
Oh, God.
And it was, pretty benign in comparison to other things, but it was really insulting. I was like, oh, immediately you associate me with being a romantic partner before you see me as a professional in this environment. And that stuck with me. And I have several other cases, but I think the sheer lack of women at that conference, it was just assumed that I would be stopping in briefly to support my boyfriend or something, or my husband, versus I was there and I had my, name tag and I was, I was part of this event and I was there on my own volition. And we just need more representation. I think for women that are nervous, I'll put it out there, for women that are nervous about public speaking or don't know how to navigate that, you can contact me and I'll help teach you, some pro tips about how to navigate it. And then also I think, we need to stop doing conference programming like, well, this is the women's block. And if you want to see a real life woman talk about something maybe related to women, you should come to this talk right now. We might discuss technology, but mostly, look, we have women.
Yeah. It's hard to get that balance right without sounding like an idiot,
Yeah, I've seen that. The other very brief story is related to a conference organizer. He was a nice guy. We're friends now. And he hosts this really cool, really large conference. That's super impressive. Their team does some really, really cool stuff. And they bring in a lot of cool ideas from around the world, a lot of cool creators, technologists, companies, they're doing it. I was interviewing him once for an article and we were having a great time. And at one point I bring up programming, how he and his team organize a conference. It's such a massive, such a massive undertaking.
Yes.
Huge and noble. It's a noble cause to give information to people and bring them together. And I brought up in particular sensitive issues within the industry, one of them being sexism, among others. And he confessed very openly to me that he didn't know how to handle it. He, as a guy, was concerned that he never had the right words to talk about or to be sensitive to things like sexism or racism. He happened to be Caucasian, or classism, that there's so many people barred from this industry because of economics. And he just run away from trying to navigate the hard issues because he didn't have the right words. And I really admired him in that moment of being able to say that and
Absolutely.
look me in the eyes and be like, I don't know how to handle it.
Well, I think that's the hardest thing. It takes a lot of courage to kind of put under the microscope something that you're worried about, particularly something like that a lot of people feel very passionate about from both sides of the coin. Darragh, we're just coming up to the end of the chat. Okay. So I don't want to hold you too long because I know you're super busy and everything that you're saying is awesome here and we have to get you on another show. But before we go into the outro stuff, I just wanted to ask you, and you touched on it at the beginning. So, you're a tech professional. Mm-hmm. You're in a very buoyant aspect of the immersive space. You're based in the US, and right now, because of COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter protests, things are different for you with regards to your working pattern. How have those things affected you, and how are you functioning as a tech professional in the work that you do?
I'll lead with the positives. I'm so excited because you just brought up Black Lives Matter and the protests that are going on here in the US and all over the world. I'm so excited by the potential for change and the actually, not the potential, the inevitable change that will result from this political discourse and this active civil demonstration, because we can't keep living in a world where not everyone is treated the same. We just can't do that. And we're going to be a lot better off if we do treat people more equally, because there's so many great ideas that exist in people's brains. And if we give them, at least equal respect, I understand that everyone has different resources that they can access, but if we give people equal respect, then they'll feel equally respected to offer the wonderful gifts that they have to the world. And we need that. Plus, I say diversity in every definition of the word, diverse teams are better teams. The more diverse your team is, the better off you're going to be, the more successful, the stronger you're going to be. So it's like a no-brainer to me to make sure that we get all different voices in the same room. That's a positive right now. I'm very excited for the political change that will come. It's coming at the cost of lives and civil records and people getting arrested, but it's noble, and no one can take that away from them. So there's that. I'm excited for change. It's the right thing to do. The second thing is less heavy and significant, but important, working from home or working remotely. Yeah. I love humans. You can see how shy I am. I love other people. But you know what? Right now we have to be conscious of distance and boundaries. And if we can still be making amazing work across industries by using the technology that we have, that is good technology, like the Skype that we're using now, Zoom, whatever the tool is, we can still create, and we can create in new ways. And that's just going to make us more innovative. That's awesome. And then a third one is that this gives me even more of a chance to work with people that I might not work with because of remote work, right? I don't have to just be in an office with others. I can co-work with someone that's in this country, whatever. I already do that, but there's even just a higher chance of it now. Yeah. As far as the heavy stuff, I'm worried about my family. I'm worried about my loved ones. I often travel a lot for work on a regular basis, and that will certainly be different for the time being. I know that we had, I think, touched on this in our conversation we had at that conference a few weeks ago. Yeah. Where we work between fashion and immersive tech and media storytelling. And they're like these three very real but very nebulous industries that may or may not always be relevant. They used to feel at times more relevant. They definitely still are, but I'm not a heart surgeon. So I have to always keep the reality check of like, oh, you can do important work. What is the important work that you'll do to support current events today? And continuously being conscious of the fact that whatever skills I use to do the work that I do or formerly did, I need to keep in mind the reality of the world, even if I'm in the business of working in a different reality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Darragh, that's amazing. And what a wonderful way to end this Tiger Heart chat. So there's going to be people on here that are going to definitely want to contact you after what you've just said for the last 58 minutes. What's the best way for someone to get in contact with you?
Sure. I have an incredibly complicated name that I'm guessing will be listed in the title of this video or nearby. But if you want to reach out to me, it's my first name and my last name, Darragh Dandurand @gmail.com. You can also find me or connect with me through my website, which is darraghdandurand.com. Just take off the Gmail. And pretty much it's my name across all social media platforms. I'm most active professionally on Twitter and Instagram. So those two. But feel free. And again, as just a quick reminder, if anyone is interested in one of the Kaleidoscope grants, I'm happy to provide them with a free trial membership in case they don't want to pay the fee, because I don't want anyone to feel economically like it's inaccessible. And then second, if there's any women out there that want help with public speaking, as a reminder, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Darragh, thank you so much. For all you guys at home having a listen, thank you so much for your time. I know like everyone's time right now is really valuable, and just having you guys listen in and get involved in the conversation has been really good. If you want to share anything, again, use the hashtag Tiger Heart Chats, all one word, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I hope you're safe, and please, whatever you do, be good.